My name is Ed, the Jester Eddinghausen. I'd like to welcome you to the Cultra Trail Running Podcast number 302.
From the belly of the Beast Coast, Glastonbury, Connecticut, this is the Cultra Trail Running Podcast. We talk about all the fun shit that happens on the trails that most normal people don't care about. The language we use is fucking explicit and raw like the trails we run on. So don't listen with your kids! Cultra is brought to you by our patrons and supporters, and we are 112% listener supported, and support is good.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Cultra Trail Running Podcast. I'm your host, Art Byram, and I am joined tonight by Fred Marolo, who I just had here for a minute, and now he is not here. Somehow we dropped Fred off of the list, I guess. And I guess and Ed, the Jester, also introduced himself in the beginning. How you doing, Ed?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me.
Very good. Glad to have you here. So, wow. So you, obviously I've heard about you for years and years out there. And I don't think that our paths had crossed until Notchview this year.
Okay.
So, so I guess maybe for those who don't know who you are in this sport, you know, I'm sure there's some people who are new to the sport who are just tuning in, or you know, maybe I don't know, maybe they certainly at this point I think pretty much everybody knows about you or has run with you some. Maybe you could kind of just tell us maybe some of the unique things as far as like the Jester and what all that entails.
Sure. All right. Well, I'm based out of Southern California, so I don't get over to the East Coast all that often, so I'm not as well known there. But I get a chance every so often to pop my head into some races out there. So I started running ultras at the age of 46. And actually, my first ultra was a 24-hour race. I ended up with 102 miles. And that was my introduction into the ultra community and into the sport. And I wasn't really, so to speak, bit by the bug right off the bat. In fact, it was a whole year later before I ran my second 100-mile race at the age of 47, back at the same 24-hour race. And then at 48, I ran my third 100-mile race. So kind of a slow start, just 100-mile as I would age up each year. And then at the age of 48, I sort of took off, I guess you could say. And so I'm still in my 40s. I decided never to leave my 40s. So coming up on Thursday, that'll be my 22nd birthday. So you can do the math on that.
Gotcha.
And I just ran a 100-mile race over the weekend, and that was 100-mile race number 265. So obviously I stepped up my game once I did that third 100, and I've done quite a few since then.
Wow. Yeah, that is great. So, and you do these all in a Jester outfit.
Yeah, so I do. So the way that came about so I ran my first 100 again at the age of 46. It was 2009. And then I started running a bunch of 100-mile, or actually marathons, a year later, and was working towards breaking the world record for most marathons in a year. I had met the two people who held the record at 106 marathons in 1 year. So I thought, I think I can, take that on. And since I had already ran a 100-mile race in under 24 hours, I knew that if I could find the right races, I could maybe double up on some marathons in a single day. And so anyway, I started running every weekend marathons, and just to kind of make it fun, I would wear different hats I got from the thrift store. And put a hat on, just a silly hat, run a marathon in that. And it's like, yeah, that was fun. And then put another hat on. And one of the hats that I got was a Jester hat. And when I put it on, it just seemed to fit my personality for multiple reasons, and then just decided to stick with it. So my wife thought, well, if you're going to be the Jester, you might as well, go all the way. So she actually made me some Jester skirts, which were the Jester colors and multi-paneled with bells at the bottom. So I ran in a Jester skirt for probably about a dozen years. And then a couple of years ago, I felt like, I'm getting a bit too old to be running in this skirt now. So then I kind of graduated up into suits. So many times I'll wear a suit like the same pattern and colored suit as the tie.
Gotcha.
If it's a hot race, especially with humidity, many times I'll go to just the shirt and the short pants. And the shirt, and people are probably thinking, well, does this guy not see patterns, because he clashes, and his hat, his shirt, and his tie all clash, which is true. But the shirt has some significance. So a couple years into running ultras, I met a guy that also from Southern California, Andy Noyes, and he wasn't really a runner, a bit heftier guy, but he was a pretty strong power walker. And I would, when I do like a multi-day race, like a 2-day, a 3-day, a 6-day race, Andy would be there many times. And so we would do a lot of night miles together, just power walk out the miles, and everybody else would go down. And it helped me get many wins and many podium finishes, just having Andy there, doing miles with me. And we probably, I would guess, well over 1,000 miles that we have done together. And many of them were 1-mile loops, like 3 days at the fair, or many of the races, 1 mile, 2-mile loop, some half-mile loop. Anyway, we did quite a few. And when I was getting ready to do my 200 100-mile race, there was only at that point one person who had done at least 200 100-mile or longer races, Sandra Brown from the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So this is late April of 2021. So Andy and I had an idea that I would go out and do one race. It was a 4-day race that also had a 100-mile race attached to it. It's called Born to Run. It's in Central California. And so the racer let me do an early start for the 100-mile with the 4-day folks. So I got that done. That was a Wednesday noon start, and finished up by Thursday afternoon. Then drove from there to Bakersfield, which is where Andy lived. Got a good night's sleep, and then the next morning we drove out to Las Vegas, and then I had 2 other 100-mile races that I was doing there. So it ended up being number 198, 199, and 200. So in a 5-day period, I was able to get those 3 races done.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was, and Andy, helped me put the, schemed with me to put that plan together, and just to make it, more than just a single race. And Andy there's a phrase Andy would use all the time: be boring, not epic, and it's kind of his catchphrase. And I'm kind of the opposite: be epic, not boring. But nonetheless, we did quite well together. So got my 100-mile race in, and a week later was Andy's birthday, his 58th birthday. A few months younger than I am, and it was on May 2nd. May 4th, when Andy's wife woke up, Andy had passed away in bed next to her.
Oh, geez. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So only 58, which that's pretty darn young.
Sure
and,
is. Yeah.
A real shocker, and quite a real loss for those who knew Andy. Unique individual, as everybody is in this sport. So I contacted his wife. I had seen her at different races, so I knew her enough to reach out to her. And Andy always had a certain shirt that he wore, same pattern shirt he wore at every single race. It was kind of his trademark, just like my trademark is a Jester. And so I reached out to his wife Blanca, and I said, I'd really be honored if I could get one of Andy's shirts I could wear, and my races. And she said, oh, Ed, we'd be honored, our family would be honored to have you do that. And so she sent me one of each of the colors that he had. He had blue, a green, and a yellow. And this is an Andy shirt, Andy Noyes shirt, one of his originals. And I've since then worn them at every single 100-mile race I've done. So I have, except for one, the very first 100-mile race I did after Andy passed away. It was too soon to but from that point on, so my 202nd 100-mile race on up to just finished my 265th. Plus, I probably got 8 or 10 DNF races that I ran in Andy's shirt, and which is fitting because Andy DNF'd the number of the 100-mile races that he entered. So that kind of rounds out the whole persona, the Jester, the outfit with the hat, I always wear an Andy Noy shirt. If I have the suit on, I'll wear the jacket and the pants. If it's too warm for the pants, I've got some colorful shorts that I wear. So anyway, that's sort of my image. And the funny thing is, if I'm at a race and I don't have my hat on, many times people don't even recognize who I am. And if they don't see the Andy shirt, then they hear me talking, and that voice sounds familiar, but I don't recognize. Oh, it's the Jester. So I kind of have to now that I've sort of started that, I have to stick with that for every race where my Jester hat.
Understood. Hey Fred, did you know Andy Noyes or no?
No.
Any chance? No. Okay. I thought maybe for some reason you might have. So Andy Cable, yes, but not Andy Noyes.
And I knew of Andy Noyes, but I did not know Andy Noyes.
Okay. Probably an ultra list guy, I would think. Sounds like by the sounds of him. So well, Ed, I'd like to, if we could, I'd like to take it back before all this. So I'd like to go back and kind of get some early history stuff. So where were you born?
I was born in Sacramento, California.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so my parents, so my mother was running away from a bad relationship, and she was actually, this was in the early 60s, so a different time.
Sure.
But she was actually out hitchhiking with her two daughters, my older half sisters, and local businessman. It was starting to rain, and it was a Friday afternoon, and he went to pick her up, and she was just looking for a ride to the bus station, and he said, well, let's come out of the rain, I'll take you to my house if you like. And so he did, and they started up a relationship, and 10 months later out popped Eddie, and but wasn't a relationship meant to last. My parents actually split shortly after I was born, and then my mother, who had a history of mental health issues. She's bipolar schizophrenic, and actually I was removed from her care at 7 months old and placed into foster care. And although it was her wish that at some point she would get me back, but it never happened. So I grew up in foster care, and a home that I had got into. Actually, they had adopted me when I was 12. So I went from being Edwin Marion Richardson Jr. to Edwin William Eddinghausen at the age of 12. And then in high school, I ran my first marathon. I was 17, and just reading Running World magazine articles and kind of figuring things out, and did a couple marathons when I was 17, a few more when I was 18, and
hey, and then, before we go into the running some more, because I always like to understand. I don't know. I think it helps us get to know each other a little bit better by kind of, if you don't mind, and if you don't want to talk about any of this, you can just say, you know what, hey, we're moving on here, Art. So, but that must have been, growing up in foster home, that must have been pretty. What was that like for you?
Well, however all of us grow up, our only point of reference is our own personal experiences. So I don't have anything to compare it to. I did always, though, sort of feel like an outsider. I never quite felt
Mhm.
like I fit in. That's kind of been, my whole life I've had that sort of a feeling, I guess you could say. But I mean, I had a roof over my head. I had clothes on my back, food in my belly, and there was some issues,
Mhm.
but overall, I know my foster dad died shortly after I was adopted. In fact, that was part of the rush to get the adoption going through because he had stage 4 cancer, so we knew he didn't
Mm.
have long. So basically, from the age of 12, when I was raised by a single mom, and she did the best that she could, but
Sure, sure. Yeah, it's not, childhood is in the experience of life, life's not an easy thing. I mean, I think most of us have had some hardship. I grew up in an active alcoholic home with parents that were divorced, and when you talk about like looking at something and saying it's normal for, this is how life is, your dad works during the, maybe on the weekends, like he's like doing manual labor, and like you're going to do whatever he says and like work alongside him and work your ass off all day, and then he's going to yell at you and then maybe pass out in the middle of the floor with his arm around the dog, you know.
mm,
And that's normal, and I kind of thought that's what everybody did, so it is, I can see that, like maybe being in a foster home or in the situations, we don't, you're right, a lot of times we don't have anything to judge. Our normal is whatever it is, and even as ultra runners it is, like somebody's like, how could you run for 24 hours or more around a 1 mile circle? Like, that's not normal. But to at least the three of us here tonight, that's like the most natural thing. Like, of course
sure,
that's what you did.
yeah,
What, everybody doesn't do that, Art?
right.
I think they do. I mean, I
I
think
think they do.
they should, and if they knew what was good for them, they would.
A funny thing is, since I started, running ultras, pretty much, I would say 95%, even better, more than that, of my friends are ultra runners. It just seems to be we tend to, we go where we feel welcome and where we have a commonality. And so, just about every friend I have now is an ultra runner.
Mhm.
Just sort of evolved that way.
Yeah. Now, yeah. Huh. So, and I also like what you said about, I could hear that there was, some struggle and some, maybe some things that weren't so good in childhood, but that also you're kind of also grateful for some of the things that are good or that were good, and the things that you did get from people in your life. And I think that it's, and again, I've been talking about this for, fans of the show know that this is something that I talk about all the time. It's like, it's things aren't one way or the other. It wasn't like childhood was bad and then it was good at this time. Most of the time things are, there's really good things going on and there's really shitty things going on, to a different mix. And you can feel really good about certain parts of childhood. Like, my dad made the most amazing, like, swing sets and toys for us, like slide for life zip lines that he would make. But then, he would, well, some of us got hurt doing some of the work that we were doing with him, because there was no regard for personal safety, around big farming equipment and stuff. So,
I have the belief system that everything that we go through makes us who we are. So I wouldn't be the person, sitting before you now if it hadn't been that I went through the difficulties, and I had good experiences as well, and
mhm.
had was blessed to have been introduced to some really great people who really looked out for me and steered me in the right direction during vulnerable times of my life. So, yeah, overall, you're looking back on it. Yeah, sure, you could talk about how things weren't so good and woe was me, or you could say, well, that was my life. It certainly it could have been better, but it certainly could have been much worse.
Mhm.
So it's just it is what it is, and we choose how we respond. It's the same thing when you're running an ultra.
Mhm.
Things uh, as much as you control what you can, but there's so many things that are out of your control that are going to happen, and then it's a matter of
Mm.
okay. So now this happened. What do I do about it? Do I curl up in a ball and whine like a little baby, or do I say, well, it's time to that's what I'm here for, is for the challenge. Time to pull up the bootstraps and get to work.
Definitely fucking
But can you
curl
do a
up.
little of both, Ed?
Yes.
Curl up in a ball and then get to work.
Yeah, maybe have maybe a little pity party, just a short
Little
one,
pity
and then
party.
move on. Sure.
You can curl up on the trail in the fetal position. I think
Yeah.
that's allowed in the
As long
middle
as
of
you
the
point in the
trail.
right direction, because if you point in the wrong direction, you might wake up and go the wrong way.
That is very true. Very
I
true.
hate when that happens. Hmm.
Uh,
Wow. So you did some running as a younger person, though, correct?
I did. I ran by the time I was 18. I'd already ran 5 marathons, and
That's quite remarkable if you think about it. For somebody, I'm basically, I'm 60s, so I think you're like 62. You said, is that right?
40, 22. Get my age right now.
Oh, sorry. Yes, 40,
Yeah,
22.
there we go.
Yeah. Well, 38, 20, 22. But yeah, so I mean, tell us about that. Like, because most people don't at 18, they're not running marathons and doing things like that, right?
Yeah, no, I guess not. I went to a small little private school that didn't have any kind of a sports program. When I say didn't have a sport, I don't mean, well, we weren't competitive. I mean, there was no organized sports whatsoever.
Mm.
So there wasn't any kind of team sports or anything. They had intramurals, basically, and PE, class. So, but something attracted me to running. It was, late 70s. At the running boom had just kind of occurred in the 70s, and one of my idols was Bruce Jenner, from
Mhm.
the 76 Olympics. He'd won the gold medal in the decathlon. Well, I didn't have any of the upper body strength or any of the abilities to do a decathlon, except, I had legs that worked. I could run. So for some reason, I was attracted to the marathon distance. And
Mm.
it was back when
Bill
it
Rogers and
Bill Rogers, yeah, it was big
Mhm.
at the Boston Marathon, Boston Billy, and so kind of aspired to be like him, and so yeah, ran a marathon, and then in college happened to meet a professor who was a marathon runner as well, and so kind of
Mm.
learned a little bit from him, and so yeah, younger time to run, and kind of had this aspiration that I'm going to beat the world record in running marathons, and I'm going to go to the Olympics. Of course, yeah, teenager with all these bright ideas, and I didn't have
Sure.
that kind of ability actually anywhere close to it. But nonetheless, and then when I was in college, I met my future wife, and then we dropped out at 19 and started well, I didn't start a family right away, but just started working, and eventually had kids, and had we have four children. So, and my wife came from a broken family as well. So
Mhm.
the odds were not stacked in our favor, getting married at 19, and both coming from broken homes. But nonetheless, we've made it work. We just celebrated our 42nd wedding anniversary just a few weeks ago. So
Very good.
pretty
So
amazing.
let's go to I want to talk some more about that first marathon though.
Yeah.
So, first of all, what was the marathon and why did you decide to run that one? Like, was there, or had you done other road races at that point?
I had done one road race. It was it just shows you how long ago this was. This is in '79. It wasn't even a 5K. It was a 3 mile, not a 3.1. It was a 3 mile little road race. And I came in first in the under 19 age category, and then I met at that race. I met another guy my age who came in second, and found out that he was going to be going to the same school that I was going to be going to. And and then we found we both had a love of running, and so we both were decided to train for the marathon. So we kind of were each other's accountability partners, and we would go out on long runs. And there wasn't really anything else, anyone else that we knew. Just had that love of wanting to see if how far we could push ourselves, so we both actually, and then we even got a third guy at our school that kind of jumped on the bandwagon too and started training. And so there's three of us that went out to do our first marathon, which it was just because looking for something that was close by. This is up in the Bay Area of Northern California. It was a race called Sri Chinmoy Marathon. Now that race doesn't exist any longer, but the Sri Chinmoy, they still hold events in New York. And in fact, there's the 6-day, 10-day, and then there's the
3,100,
5,000K that they do every summer. And I've done their 10-day race. But anyway, this was the Sri Chinmoy Marathon, and just convenience of timing and the right place. They put on quite a few runs back then as well. I know that I was looking to find out what some of the history of ultra running in Connecticut was, and I wondered if they had, naively, I wondered if they had 100-mile races before and how many. And I saw that they put on an event that Ted Corbett ran, amongst other people, and he, they put in, I think, a 24-hour event, and they went over 100 during that, of course. So, interesting. Yeah, they seem to be all over the place. Fred, have you ever done any of those, or?
I haven't. I think they still have a 24-hour in Rockland County too, right? Is that right? But I haven't done the 6 or the 10.
I don't think they have any races anymore out on the West Coast. Back when Sri Chinmoy was alive, they did quite a bit of races around different places. But they still are on the East Coast for sure. Yeah. And so I did that one in June of 1980, just about a week before my high school graduation. And then the next month I did the San Francisco Marathon, because I was going to college near there, and then did a few more in that area.
So how did your first marathon go?
Well, I'm 17, a hot-blooded, young 17-year-old stud out there thinking I can conquer the world. So I went out way too fast, but
really, how unusual.
Yeah, exactly. The funny thing is, I blame that on being 17, but here many years later, I'm still not unusual to go out probably faster than I have any business doing, but nonetheless, that's just the nature of it. So went out fast, and kind of hit the proverbial wall, and then had to slow down and kind of recover a bit. It started up with a 3:10 marathon, which not bad for a first marathon.
No,
this is back though. This is 1980, and back then, if you ran a marathon that was slower than 4 hours, you were pretty much shamed. It's like, how dare you even show your face? You can't even do a sub 4-hour marathon. It changed a lot since then to where it's much more friendly to the mid pack and back of the pack. But and in fact, when I ran my first marathons, the qualifying time for Boston, they had one qualifying time. They didn't have the age graduated times, and it was a sub 250. So if you couldn't run a sub 2 hour 50-minute marathon, forget it. You weren't going to go to Boston. But yeah, so went out too hard and paid for it, and but still it was a good race overall. I had a decent experience, and the best I did. When I was 18, I had a 3:01:18, and again, same thing. I went out way too fast and was definitely, on track to get a sub 250, but hit the wall and slow walked quite a few miles and still ended up with a 3:01. So
that's not bad if you're walking, right? I mean,
it's part of it's
certainly.
walking. Yeah.
Very good. So you did some marathons, and then you kind of tell us why you got away from marathons, right? And away from running completely. Is that right?
Yeah, just work got busy working, and then eventually started family.
What did you go to school for, and what were you working as?
Well, I dropped out of college after 1 year, so I actually I went to police academy after a year of college and graduated from police academy. But I knew it wasn't really right for me. I actually didn't even, once I got out of police academy, I didn't even apply for a job. You can go through police academy two ways. You can go, self-supported, or you can be sponsored by a department, get hired by a department, and then they'll put you through. And I had worked when I was in college, I worked security, and our head of security at college was a former police officer, and kind of convinced me that, hey, you should go to police academy. This might be something you might enjoy, and I agree with it. Now, at police academy, I did the physical qualifying. You had to run a mile and a half in under 12 minutes. And I did set the actual police academy course record for a mile and a half at 7:47. And since then, so that was the course record, and we were on a trip up to the Northwest with my kids at the time, to a family camp, and I decided to stop in at the police academy and show my son, because there was a plaque that showed all the course records, and I was proudly show my son, hey, look what your dad did. Well, sure enough, I found out that they changed the standards. They no longer had a mile and a half. It became an 800-meter requirement. So my course record disappeared, wasn't even there anymore. So
well, it happened though. So that's
some bright guy said, like, who's gonna chase a criminal for a mile and a half? Let's just do a mile.
Yeah,
right. That's
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if they run for more than that, they're probably innocent, right?
Or they deserve to get away. If
they deserve it. That's right. You earned it. Go ahead.
Yeah. Run for freedom.
Yeah. So got out of police academy and just decided that that just wasn't really a career for me, and then just started working different jobs, and then. When I was in college, I took a course. It was American Red Cross CPR first aid instructor course, because my majors in college were psychology and phys ed. And so my goal was, I thought, well, I wanted to become a probation officer because, I'd been a foster kid, and I wanted to, work with kids and use, running to help, kids that were in the foster care system. So that was my idea. Double major phys ed psychology, and then went to police academy, and then I started dating my wife before police academy, and then got out of police academy, and like I said, I didn't even apply for a police officer job, and went in a different direction. And then, but I'd taken that instructor course, and then my wife and I, a couple years after we lived in Napa County, California, and then we took a bike trip to Southern California on 10 speeds at the time. And I had a buddy who was in college down in Southern California. and we stopped in to see him, and kind of hung out at his place for a couple weeks. And then I saw at the local hospital they had an opening for a CPR instructor, and so I applied for it and got it, and then started teaching CPR, and eventually started doing part time, and just started doing that more and more. And then eventually, a few years later, I went into it full time pretty much, and specialized in dental office CPR training, which it's CPR.
Wow.
It's nothing different. It's just that is one of the.
It's just that when you're given mouth to mouth, the breath is fresher, right?
Yeah, you would hope. But yeah, and it's not like there's a preponderance of people that need CPR in dental office. It just happens to be that for them to keep their license up, they're required to do it every 2 years. And it just happened to work out for me that I started doing more and more dental offices, and then that sort of became my specialty. So that's been my pretty much my life career. I'm proud to say, although there's really no way to really find out, the numbers wise, if this holds out. But I kind of think I hold a couple world records in that. I've now taught over 10,000 CPR classes. Just taught one earlier today. Taught over 10,000 CPR classes, and I've issued over 100,000 CPR certificates. So it just that became my life profession.
That's great, and it fits in a lot of ways. I mean, knowing you and kind of what you do on the course, like you're not. Some people, I mean, there's certainly people who are out there who just go and run, right? Who just show up and run and do their thing, and who focus on what they're doing and go on their own way. And then there's other people who are out there just jackassing around, having a good time, and nothing wrong with that either, right? And then there's other people out there who make a connection with people, and I would and try to help them, and to me, that's when I think of you, that's the kind of person that I think of you as, is that I know, I had certainly heard about this from others, but then watching you out at Notchview, I watched several times where you would either, you'd be all of a sudden find yourself in a conversation with somebody, and then you're finding out the names of people that you're speaking to, and then having some real conversations, and from wherever these people were at a given time. And sometimes, I mean, if you think about it, after people have been running for hours on end, a lot of times the places where they are mentally is not necessarily it's not always easy to deal with some people out there, from where they are. But you were very much able to meet people wherever they were, and to kind of give them, in a very kind way, I think, what they needed, and made a connection with them. Like, I saw you ask, and lots of people get names of the other people that they're talking to, but 99% of the people out there forget who somebody tells you your name and you don't remember it. I saw probably 6 or 8 times where you just knew people by name that you had met on the course that day, and maybe you had met them 6 hours earlier and you still knew who they were. So it's I think that means a lot to people, and I felt that you were making a connection with the people that you interacted with. So
I appreciate that. Well, that's and thank you. That really warms my heart. And that's everybody has their reasons and motivations to do these things. And right now I'm actually on a quest to break a world record that I've had in the past that someone else got, and I'm trying to get it back again. That's the most 100-mile races in a year. So this weekend is number 26 in 26 weeks. So I'm trying to get at least one a week. My goal not was to get 2, and I came up short. Didn't get my second one in, but anyway, it's making connections with people that really, is what I look forward to in a race. I really enjoy the the fixed time format and the small loop courses, because it does give me an opportunity to meet different people that we might be, our mileage might be completely different, but we're the same place on the loop at the same time, and we can have a connection and share many miles together. For example, at Notchview, I came in with Eugene Bruckert, who I've known Eugene for a couple of years. He's from Illinois. He's from Chicago, and he's 89, and he was out there, and I had the opportunity to come in. Happened to be that it was the last loop that he was doing, and because I had to take off early to get back to the Boston airport, I miscalculated my my timing, and didn't realize how much time it took getting out of Boston, getting to the race in the first place, and I knew I'd need that same time going back, so I had to leave the race early. But we were the same loop and crossed the finish line together, and then I just ran with him again this last weekend in Oregon. So I came up from California, and he came out from Chicago, and 1 mile loop course, and we had the opportunity to spend some time together. Our mileage was very different, but we happened to be at the same place at the same time on the course, and so that's, for me, I really enjoy making those connections and getting to meet people. And I learned I had an experience that taught me that you're never going to learn everything there is to learn. And even though, but I hold multiple world records, including with the 265 100-mile finishes. That's the most in the world. But there's always still something to learn, and I sometimes I'll be sharing the course with someone who's a beginner, and I'll learn something from them that they learned. It's like, wow, that's something new. I'll put that in my memory bank. So I like making those connections. And then the other thing too that I find is whenever, and luckily I learned this early on, whenever I'm having a difficult time in a race, which, as many of these as I've done, they're still challenging, issues come up and challenges, but the easiest way to get through a challenge is to quit focusing on whatever's bothering me and focus on somebody else, because invariably someone else in the course is going to be feeling just as bad or maybe worse. And if I can focus on them, it gets me out of my little pity party, and allows you to become sort of a caregiver for someone and help get them through whatever, to the next aid station or to the next loop or whatever. But it gives me something to focus on. And many times, by the time we've shared some time together, whether it's just 1 mile or a couple hours, I will have forgotten about my own problems by the time we finish, because I've not been focused on them. So I do really enjoy making those kind of connections, and that's why I'm more drawn to that type of event rather than like a point-to-point 100-mile trail race. I do them and I enjoy them, but I enjoy the fixed time loop courses, and I'm actually also more competitive at the shorter fixed time, the shorter loop events. I tend to do pretty decently at those, especially if it's the multi-days. So for multiple reasons why, that really is an attraction for me.
Gotcha. Interesting. Huh. Fred, did you have something you wanted to add there, or?
Oh, I was just looking at your ultra sign up. It looks like you have crammed quite a few races into, what is it, about 15 years worth of ultras? Yeah.
Right.
So for 350 races in 15 years, that's pretty prolific.
A few. Yeah, it's a few.
It's a few. Yeah. So I looked up the very first entry on ultra sign up is from May of 2009. And you were in a marathon with 9 people. And among them was Yolanda Holder. She finished last in that marathon. So, yeah,
Yeah.
in
So
Apple Park, right?
people who may not know who Yolanda Holder is, she's quite a. I haven't seen her the last year or two, but quite an amazing power walker. She's not a runner, but she's a power walker. But she was one of the two people who had the world record for the most marathons. And so at that race, so that was so just to kind of, I did the 5 marathons when I was 17, 18, and then from the age of 18 to 46. So there's a 28-year span where I didn't have any marathon finishes. In fact, when I was 31, so this would be in 1994. So I ran my 5th marathon, 1981. So 13 years later, now I'm 31 and got a few kids. And I decided, go out and run another marathon. And so I signed up for the Los Angeles Marathon, and I was sort of complacent about it. I knew, hey, I did 5 marathons as a teen, all some 4-hour marathons, and I'm still in decent shape. I don't need to put a whole lot of effort into it. But then, as it got closer to marathon, race day, I kind of was getting a little bit nervous, thinking, oh, I should go out and do some runnings, or get at least somewhat prepared. So then I went and did a few long runs, and I just hadn't. It'd been so long since I've been running that my knees were really taking a beating. Were really, quite sore. But I decided, just going to go up to the marathon and make it happen. So showed up and got through 3 miles, and my knees were so sore that I actually quit at mile 3. And turned around and walked back to my car. And of course, going and I'd been out there doing the 7-minute miles. So LA Marathon is the largest marathon west of the Mississippi. So it typically has 20,000 or more people. Maybe back then didn't have quite that number, but still a very large number. And so I'm going against the crowds, going back to my car, all these people, the runners and the slower runners, and then the fast walkers, and then the back of the pack, and all these people. I'm going, like a salmon, going against the current, and then got back to my car and just felt like a complete, loser. And a couple weeks later, I talked to a guy. Now, to this day, I don't remember if he was a running coach or even a marathon or even a runner at all. I just remember having a conversation with some guy and telling him about, how I, blew at this marathon, and, I used to be able to run marathons when I was a teenager, and then, now I can't even run past 3 miles. And he suggested that, well, maybe when you're, a kid, all those miles you did training for the marathon, running on the streets all that time, I maybe, beat my body up pretty bad, and maybe done some damage to my knees. Now, I don't know that he was a person who had any kind of a knowledge or any authority in that area.
Yeah.
For some reason, what he said just stuck in my head, and that I was convinced that was it. I'd never run a marathon again. So that was at the age of 31. So then, another 15 years go by, and now I'm in my mid 40s, and again, I was never going to run again. Certainly, I didn't even know what 100-mile races were at that time, but I'm not going to even be able to run marathons. And then I had invested quite a bit in real estate, and actually took some real risks and was quite over leveraged. Well, if you remember what happened to the real estate market in 2007, 2008,
yeah,
especially on the West Coast, and everything it was like a house of cards. It had just all came tumbling down, and the worst of it was that I had mortgaged my own home and drawn all the cash out I could for that to fund these investments, and just went into a tailspin of depression, and barely able to work, and so not only did we lose all our investment properties, but the worst of it was when the sheriff came knocking at the door with a notice to vacate. Lost our home, and
Boy, that must have been difficult.
well, it's bad enough, to have to tell your wife that I screwed up, and because I didn't keep her informed of what was going on. I hid it from her, and so she wasn't really aware so much until things started happening, and then so that was bad enough to deal with that. But the worst of it is, I had kids that were. They weren't, if they were young enough, you could, we're going to move to another house, and you could kind of, get by. They wouldn't really, be privy to what's going on. But now my kids were, teenagers at the time. And,
oh boy. Yeah.
So yeah, they no hiding from them what happened. So I was just even getting worse into a depression, and to the point to where I was actually had suicidal ideations. And your audience is familiar with that. That's where you actually start planning. You're not just thinking about it; you're actually making plans. So, and because I had $2 million of life insurance, so to me it made sense. Look, if I die, my wife gets this $2 million. Not only can she keep the house, but there'll be enough money to raise the kids. They'll be able, live comfortably, and so. The best thing I can do for my family is actually just end it all, let them get that money, because I'm a mess. And so that I knew exactly how I was going to do it. There was because I drove all over Southern California to the dental offices during the CPR training, and some of the offices were located where I had to travel this windy mountainous road, and just was the opportunity that could accidentally miss a windy curve and just go out the edge, and no one be the wiser, and my wife would collect the insurance money. So my wife kind of figured out that I where my head was, and as a good wife would do, she definitely helped me see the wisdom of getting in some mental health. And I saw a psychiatrist. It just happened to be by chance a psychiatrist I saw was a marathon runner and had done Boston a couple of times. We had that connection, and of course, I told him, well, Mom, that's awesome. I never got to Boston, and I can't even run marathons anymore. And he said, well, Ed, why don't you just go out there and start walking, and just walk every day? It'll be so good for you to get the endorphins going, and exercise. And so I did that, started just walking a little bit. And then after, a few weeks or so of doing that, a month or two, decide, well, I'm going to try and run just a little bit, see how that feels on my knees, and started to run a little bit, and then ran more and more. And then finally was able to get through a 3-mile loop, ran the whole way, and my knees weren't hurting. And so I told him, I said, I think I can actually do a marathon. So then, I decided to train for marathon. And that was, so I did a marathon in March of 2009 and did well. Knees were fine because I, trained properly. And then, and so when I was at that marathon in March, it was the Pasadena Marathon. I saw this slender black woman who, that's not that common in a marathon, unless they're the front of the pack. But she was a power walker, and then I saw her at a race I did, my second marathon in April, which is a much smaller race, and that same woman was there. And then when I did my third marathon, she was at that race as well. And later on found out it was Yolanda Holder. In fact, when I was at that race, the third marathon I did, in 09, I saw a window decal that said Ballard 135 on the back of a vehicle. And I had no interest in that race. I actually thought anybody who would run that race, I was aware of it because, Death Valley, I live in Southern California. So, it was a race I had heard about. But,
Pam Reed, maybe you'd heard about Pam Reed at that point, running on the sun or anything.
I wasn't doing any ultra racing. So I didn't know any of the people who had ran it. I just had heard enough about it to know that it was a ridiculously stupid thing to do. And anybody who would run out in the middle of Death Valley in July, had a screw loose and needed,
Professional help.
professional help. And I truly thought that, what kind of a sicko would even consider doing that?
Yeah.
But I had no interest in the race itself, but I figured, well, maybe I could, talk to whoever, that individual is and find out about moving to an ultra because I just done a couple marathons in a short time and maybe going to do a 50K. So anyway, my goal was, and this is a marathon that was around a local park. It was like a 2-mile loop or something. And so I decided, well, I'm going to meet each person I can and talk to them, find out if that's the ultra person. If not, then, run up, meet the next person. So as I was doing that, I did meet Yolanda Holder and actually got to chat with her and told her, I saw you at the last 2 marathons I did. Well, found out that she was doing marathons every single weekend because she was, attempting to break the world record for most marathons in a year. But I eventually did meet the guy who had done Badwater 135, and Steve Till was his name, and talked to him about, wanting to do an ultra. And he said, well, you've already done 3 marathons in basically a 2-month period of time. He said, oh, yeah, you definitely could do a 50K. He said, what you should do. So there's this race coming up in 2 weeks. It's called Nanny Go. It's a 24-hour race. It's a 1-mile loop around this horse property. And when he said 1-mile loop around a horse property, but for 24 hours, I said, man, that just sounds so boring and monotonous. He said, well, what is it you're doing at this race? And they remind me that, yeah, I'm doing a 2-mile loop, in the marathon. And he said, so, are you finding this boring? I said, no, actually it's kind of fun. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. So he said, well, why don't you come up to that race and see what you can do? And he was the first ultra runner that I met, and he was going to be there. So, and he gave me some advice. He said, well, you're going to need to slow your pace way down. You can't run marathon pace. He said, you're going to have to actually do some walking. You can't, you're not going to be able to run the whole thing. And then he said, you also need to eat real food. You're not going to just be like a marathon, get by on goos and gels and that kind of stuff. So that race was 2 weeks later. So as you said, the marathon you saw on the Ultra Science, that was my 3rd marathon when I got back into running. And then if you look at Ultra Science, you see 2 weeks later was this Nanny Goat 24-hour race. So showed up to the race, parked in the dirt parking area, and passing all these cars with all these bumper stickers and window decals, Western States 100, Leadville Trail 100, Badwater 135. And I'm just getting more and more intimidated. Went up, checked in, got my race packet, my bib, and I took it back to my car, and I got it into my car, and I sat in the driver's seat, and for about 5 or 10 minutes I contemplated driving away, because I just felt like I don't belong with these. These are not professional runners, but these are all people who run these ultra marathon races. And, I've only done marathons, and, who do I think I am? I don't, belong with this group of people. And I probably would have driven away, except for the fact that I had told people I was going to be doing this race. So I didn't want to have the shame of, having to tell my friends, oh, I decided not to do it. And then my wife was going to come out, that evening and crew for me. So it's like, so I, went out, did the race, did the 1-mile loops, and followed C's advice, did the 1-mile, and I did it, at a much slower pace, and got to the marathon. It ran up at a much slower pace, and I started doing some, walking and running. And then my wife eventually showed up, and she knew less about running ultras than I knew, and what I knew was next to nothing. So I got up to some decent mileage, but I was just completely just shot. And so this is like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I sat down in the chair and told my wife, I think I can keep going, but my feet are just destroyed. I don't know what to do. She didn't know what to do, but so she took my shoe off and just very gently peeled my sock off, and she had this weird look on her face. So I could tell this is pretty bad news. And I said, well, just tell me what is, what do you see?
Give it to me straight.
Yeah, exactly. She said, honey, there's nothing wrong with your foot. It's like, no, it's like raw. It's like on fire. My feet are burning. She said, you don't even have a blister. And
You big fucking baby, get out there.
well, I didn't realize at the time that because I'd never pounded my feet that long, that it was just my nerve endings were just pretty much, beat up, and so got my sock and shoe back on, and I'd been sitting for about 10 minutes and got up, and I could barely move. I just had stiffened up. And so this shows you how naive I was about these events. Again, I'd never done anything more than a marathon, and had only done a few marathons. I thought, because I knew they had a 6 hour and a 12 hour and a 24 hour race, I thought that if you signed up for like a 24 hour race, you had to be on the course. You could be going slow, but you had to be on the course for the 24
Oh,
hours.
you do.
And if you quit before that,
Yeah.
you would get disqualified for some reason. I didn't know any better, and didn't want to ask these people, didn't want to bother them. So just walked.
Just as a timeout aside. So if you're out there right now listening to this, running your first 24-hour race, what he said is exactly true. So don't think about getting off of the track or the course, because otherwise, if you want to be disqualified and have all your mileage not count, feel free.
Gone.
Yeah, just it'll even, you have to erase your Strava even, it says. So that's the rule.
Yeah. And never show your face again in ultra. You loser.
Right.
You
pretty much.
So
I love that. That's great. I wonder how many miles have been run just on bullshit, or a misunderstanding of what the the rules are.
Ed racked up 102 miles in this race just because he had to keep going, right?
Ignorance is bliss. I didn't know any better, so I just kept walking it out. And by the time the dust had settled, I'd actually surpassed my goal of at least 50K, because I want to do an ultra, but past the 50K, past 50 mile, past 100K, and even 2 miles past 100 miles. So I know firsthand that you don't have to go through that process, because if I had known better, or if I had talked to ultra runners, they would have probably said, hey, yeah, your first one, go out, just get a 50K in, or maybe 50 mile, and then recover from that, then go do 100K, and then maybe 6 months later do your first 100. But I didn't know anybody to steer me in that direction. So
you also have to watch out who you talk to too. I happened to be I ran my first I ran a 50K, and then I ran a 50 mile like the next year. And then I had planned on running 100K the next year, and then 100 mile the following year. That was like my plan. And I got in the car with Charlie Engel, and he said,
"Oh no,
if you ran the 50 mile," he goes, "that's basically 100 miles. You're good. Go ahead, run the 100 mile." So he said, I didn't have to go. Like he said, you can go do that tomorrow if you want. So I kind of followed his advice. I took that school of advice, and it hasn't, it's worked for me. So,
well, I'm very proud that I have steered people over to the quote dark side of running ultras, and in fact, I coach, do run coaching for people doing their first marathon or their first 100, or I enjoy that process of changing their mindset. That you can. It's amazing what you're capable of doing if you don't limit yourself, with our preconceived ideas.
Have you found that you've limited yourself? Like, I know that in theory not to do that, but lots of times we learn things through, through experiences, where we do things the other way. So have you limited yourself where, like, you could have done a lot more, but you kind of set a low ceiling for yourself?
I'm kind of going the other direction. I'm always trying to push the envelope a bit. Typically, although I have my races where I show up and things aren't going well, and I'll pull back on my goals. But so, for example, I'm trying to do more than 52 100-mile races this year. Actually, my goal is to do over 60, which would require me to do one every weekend, and some weekends do more. So when I went to Notchview, my goal was to actually knock out 200-mile races there. And it was doable. But as I had mentioned earlier, when I didn't plan my timing right. So by the time I got to the airport and I had order or pre-register for a rental car, and but I still had to go through the long line at budget, car rental. By the time I got my rental car and got out of Boston, and I just wasn't thinking. I'm used to LA traffic, but I think that we're famous for our LA traffic. No place else in the U.S. has traffic. Well, yeah, there's lots of places that have traffic. I just wasn't thinking. So it was like LA traffic getting out. But by the time I finally showed up to Notchview, I was 2.5 hours, late. But not a big deal. We had 72 hours. So my goal was to knock the 100-mile out, and then to jump into the or was it this? Did they?
There was a 48. They had they had 100-miler, and then they also had timed races.
Yeah. So I did the 107 first, got that out of the way, and then my goal was to do another 100 in the 48-hour race. And as I was doing it and on very little sleep, I started working the numbers, and I knew that I needed to catch my plane. I needed to leave 2.5 hours before the race finished. So I got there 2.5 hours late, had to leave 2.5 hours early. And once I figured that out, it's like, I just don't have enough time. So I actually took a longer sleep break. So I still, finished it off until, whatever it was, 2.5 hours before the race would have normally ended, and still got 81 miles in on my second attempt. But the goal was to get 2 separate 100-mile races. So I've actually attempted that many times this year, and only a couple of times have I actually made it work where I pulled off more than one for the weekend. So I've got like five or six times where just couldn't pull it off, either didn't have as much time as I thought I had, or missed a flight, or and I did have, and I've even had a couple of different DNFs, but I did have an opportunity at 10 days in the Dome. I was actually able to knock out 6 separate 100-mile races during the 10 days. So that really got me back on track, because I was way off track. Yeah. So that so I actually tend to push myself, but and push my goals, but I'm okay with if I come up a bit short. I don't beat myself up, because I know going into it that I'm pushing the envelope here a bit, and so if I pull it off, great. And I learned this. So you guys probably know Eric Clifton. Have you ever ran with Eric Clifton, or know the name Eric Clifton?
Yeah.
Eric Clifton was, you could say, the original Jester. I didn't know this when I started running, that he would always run in colorful tights that he actually sewed himself. But and he lives like 10 miles from me, but I had no idea who this guy was. But once I got into running ultras, I had saw him at a race, a 100-mile race, and he at one point had the record for the fastest trail 100. It was Rocky Raccoon, and he held that for like 16 years. And then he also had the JFK 50-mile course record for like 17 years. So the guy, I mean, he ran Badwater and won Badwater and many other races. So, but he had a reputation of just going all out, and either he would have a phenomenal race, set course records, just blow everybody away, or he would completely blow up and drop out. That was just his style. It was all out. And so, I had a chance to talk with him at a race, and and he just told me, I said, well, what do you think about DNFs? He said, no fucking big deal. I don't care about a DNF. I just care to do what I can, and it doesn't mean anything to me if I I mean, that was his language. It's like or what? Who cares? And it was really a good lesson for me to learn. Hey, you set a big goal, and if you make it, great, amazing. And if you don't, hey, at least you didn't phone it in. You put it all out there. And so
That's right. Yeah.
as long as I'm able to. So I mean, I've been blessed because of that attitude. I actually the race I just did, I won, and I'm proud to say that was. So I'll turn 62 here in 2 days, but I've won 500-mile or longer races at the age of 61, at the age of 61, 5. So I do hold the world record for most 100-mile or longer wins. This one was my 78th, but I also have the record for most second place 100-mile or longer finishes, 55.
So you have the record for the most 100-mile wins. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
I thought that was a speed goat
No.
thing, but it used to be.
Well, let me clarify.
Okay.
Yes, he has the world record for most 100-mile wins.
Oh, gotcha.
He does. Carl Messer. He does 100-mile races. I do races that are 100 miles or longer, like multi-day races, where I run, miles or 200 miles or 3 or 4 or whatever. So, so technically, if you were to say who has the most 100-mile wins, yeah, it's Speedgo. It's Carl Meltzer. Plus, the races that he's won are phenomenal races in his day. He's a bit older now, so he's slowed down a bit. But in his day, he's won Hard Rock and Wasatch and many really hardcore races. So those aren't my races. I'm not such a good mountain or trail runner, but I do really well on the multi-day races. I happen to be able to go with very little sleep and can just grind it out. So so I have 78 wins now and 100 mile or longer now. And if you were to, and I have the world record for most 100-mile or longer races with 265. But if you are looking for who has the actual most 100-mile races, that would be Mike Smith. Mike Smith is up to, I think it's up to 225. There's 30 people in the world who have done at least 100-mile or 100 or more 100-mile races. I think there's 2 or 3 that are this summer going to be added to the list. And then there's 3 of us who have done at least 200. So that's Sandra Brown from Great Britain. She's now 75. And then Mike Smith, he's 67, I think. And then, of course, myself. But Mike's still out there knocking out 100-mile races. He does 12 to 15 or so every year. So he's doing it. But
gotcha.
So again, if you make that distinction, some people are kind of a purist and they'll make a point of that. And I'm, I'll certainly concede, yeah, if you're looking for who's, pure 100-mile trail races, who has the most wins.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's impressive. Congratulations on that. That's a very cool thing. So I did want to ask you about, I know that when you're running or when I run 100 milers, it involves sleep deprivation. And for me, I find that to be such a taxing thing mentally for my mental health. It sets me off balance. It clouds my my cognitive abilities and things like that. You had mentioned mental health struggles at times. How do you fit the two in? Like how do you keep these race efforts as positive things in your life rather than detractors from your life?
Well, it is if you look at mental health and depression, two of the best things to help fight depression are hydration and sleep. And many times people who are depressed are dehydrated and they're sleep deprived. So now some people, there's many factors that go into it, obviously that's just, two contributing factors. And, many times people might need medication. In fact, when I was in my deepest bit of depression, that was one of the things that my psychiatrist did is he got me on some medication, which I desperately needed at the time. So that basically saved my life. But so, there can be a fine line, but when I'm not running, races where I'm getting sleep deprived, I'm actually working on making sure I try to get as much sleep as I can. But that's one of my skill sets is I do really well on minimal sleep in a race. I do well in heat, to the point to where people think I enjoy doing heat races. Like I've done the Badwater 135, the race that I knew that people who did that race were just, sickos, and I've done that one now 10 times in a row and finished it each time. And I do decently at it. It's not that I like the heat. It's just that I'm adapted well to heat because I live in the desert. I live in Southern California.
And you overdress as part of you're always heat acclimated, I would imagine, because you're always in a heat suit.
So people always ask me, like when they see me running, it must be cooking in that hat. And I don't really notice it so much. I'm so used to it that it's like, it's a little bit toasty, but it's not like I'm getting overheated. And, if I need to, I can always pour cold water on it or even tuck ice up into it if I need to. So it's not really a problem for me. But this, as I've gotten older, I've definitely lost speed. There's just, that's all there is to it,
Sure.
And my fastest, I did a sub 15-hour 100. I've done some 16-hour 100s and many sub 20s, and my best 24-hour was 144 miles. But I'm nowhere near that ability now. But I've learned over the years that what I've lost in speed, I've been able to make up for in just the experience and mental toughness and the ability to go without sleep. I used to definitely a 24-hour race, 100 miles and 30 hours, I could go with no sleep, and it wasn't a problem. But I would always say, well, yeah, but when you start getting to the 48-hour races, oh yeah, you definitely got to get some sleep because, I just didn't see how you could do without it. Well, I've actually done a couple of 48-hour races where I've done it on minimal sleep. I'm talking about maybe a total of 1 hour, maybe 2 hours, and that's broken up into little categories. And amazingly, you can train your mind and body for it. Now, definitely sleep deprivation messes with your head, and you're prone to not only hallucinations, but you're prone to definite negative thinking. And so I've learned, just by doing them over and over and over, you build that mental toughness up. And again, it's where if I'm in a race and and that was one of the problems I was having at Nazi View as well. I was actually falling asleep on the course. And that's not healthy because you can get hurt. And because I'm trying to do every single weekend a race, if I fall asleep on the course, I'm walking and I trip and fall and get hurt. Well, there goes, and I need time for recovery. Well, there's no room for error. Because the world record is 50 100-mile races in a year. So, I've got to stay on top of that. But you can train your brain for it. But again, that's where I'll try and just, connect up with somebody at the race. And it amazes me because I'll come upon somebody and, they're going slower than I am. And I'll say, hey, can I jump in with you? And they're like, oh, no, Ed, no, I'm way too slow for you. It's like, are you kidding? If I don't, have someone to connect with, I'm going to, fall asleep on the course, or I'm going to have to, take a sleep break. So no, you'll do me a favor. I'd rather go slow, but keep moving than try and do it on my own. So, and then that's where now, and it always amuses me because quite often we'll get through whatever mileage we do together, and they'll thank me profusely. Oh yeah, thank you so much for helping me. It's like, you're welcome, but you do realize that you helped me as much or more than I helped you. Remember, I was the guy who was about to fall asleep on the course, and I'm trying to get big miles here. You actually I'm the win. I'm getting the win because you helped me be able to stay out here, when everybody else is going to sleep. So, and it just, and I found that to be the case. Like the race that I just did, it was a 24-hour race. In 6 hours in, I was in 13th place, but I wasn't too concerned because, I knew, the race is, it's a 24-hour race, not a 6-hour race. And by the time, we got through to the finish, I had gotten through 100 miles and the closest person had gotten to 80.
Mm-hmm.
So, things, turned around, and it's just because I kept out there and I knew the pace that I had to do to get through, and many people had gone out faster than they should have. And so the experience, having done so many of these and having been through these situations, I know what it feels like. I know when it gets to that point, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I've been here before. I know what it takes to get through it, and I
Yeah.
know eventually 24. I mean, and when you've done multi-day races, 2-day, 3, 4, 6-day, 10-day races, a 24-hour race isn't really that long, in a point of reference, So it's like, I know I can get through it. I just need to keep moving, and eventually, how badly do I want, the win? And plus, it got to a point where I knew the win was pretty much mine, but I wasn't there for a win. I was there for 100 miles. So
Yes, sure.
miles, it's like, because I drove 1,000 miles up to Oregon and did the race and drove 1,000 miles, back. And so, what's all of that time
Oh
and
my gosh.
effort to come up short of 100 miles? It's not worth
You drove 1,000 miles. I couldn't run that far.
it.
Well, I mean,
That's the opposite we always hear. You
I
ran.
know.
I get tired, driving that far. But yeah,
That's right. Yes.
the second weekend. So the weekend before, I also did a 24-hour race in Oregon, and same thing, 1,000-mile drive up, do the race, 1,000-mile drive back.
Oh.
And I typically, will fly if I'm able to, but the weekend after Notchview, I had a 24-hour race scheduled for Tennessee. And if you remember, that was the weekend that they had all kinds of internet issues, and my
Yes.
flight got canceled. And so, boom, there goes, a race that I needed on my schedule to, get me, one ahead. I'm trying to get ahead of I'm at 26 for 26 weeks, but I want to, build that up a bit.
And all these things are outside of your control, right?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
it's like, cyber attacks and
Yeah,
who knows what else, fires, probably,
sure.
smoke,
There was even
fires and
in Oregon.
hurricanes and
Yeah. So
snowstorms.
I knew if I drove, at least that was in my control, and so that means, it's a 16-hour drive, but at least I know I'm going to get there, and not have to worry about a canceled flight. So yeah, it worked out. But again, the sleep, I look forward to the challenge. That's, why we do these things. And again, I ran with Eugene Bruckard. He was there this weekend, and he had been at Notchview, 89 years old. And I look at him, and there's a guy, 78, named Dale, who I ran with the weekend before in Oregon. And I look at those guys are, really my role models. I mean, I don't, like Jim Walmsley. I mean, amazing what that guy's capable of doing, and the fast 100-mile runners. But I don't, I peripherally kind of follow them, but not a whole lot. But the ones that really inspire me are the guys who are much older than me, because I look at them and think, man, if they can still be out there, like Trishul, guys like that, if they can still be out here doing this, sure, they're going slower. Sure, they're not doing the miles that they used to do, but they're doing this at that age. It just blows away. So that kind of inspires me to where, as I get slower, I can still, especially with these fixed time events. That's one of the great things about it, is because anyone at any level can do them, and you can.
It does give a way to, to touch down softly, right?
Sure.
I mean, like, you're not going to get thrown off the course.
Right.
Do you ever think about that at the end of your running career?
I set these massive goals to where, the end of my running career is way down the road. So, right now I'm looking at a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 goal. So the goal is to have at least 500 or more 100-mile starts, at least 400 100-mile finishes, at least 300 100-mile podiums. And let's see, I got
200 and 100.
At least 200, 100-mile losses, and at least 100-mile wins. So I'm heading in that direction. I've got 166 podiums. I have 78 wins. I have 265 finishes to 293 starts. So, it's years down the road to get to those goals. So I like having goals that are so far off that I may not get to them. At this point, if I can get to 300, which I should be able to by just after the beginning of the year. So I look at, even after this year of trying to do one every weekend, if I can scale back to 10 or 15 a year, but 10 years, 20 years down the road, those numbers add up like Eugene at 89.
Gotcha. Fred, what do you I've been kind of talking here and not giving you a chance there.
That's all right. I'm doing fine. I'm here.
Okay.
I'm impressed with with how prolific Ed wants to be. Like to keep getting at it. And he's not super young, but you've got some good years left. So there's no reason that you can't get to those goals. But they're ambitious goals, Ed. So
well, we say someday I will not be able to do this, but today is not that day.
That's right.
So
right.
I had to. So it was August of 2021 when I actually finally broke the record for most 100-mile finishes. It was my 210th, and I think it was in New Jersey. It was I can't remember the name of it. It was a 24-hour race. I did it with Trishel, I remember. And anyway, but once I got to there, it's like, well, I need to have another goal. Otherwise I'm going to get lazy without another goal. So so then I just keep setting bigger goals. And then once in October of 2021, I had surpassed Giannis Koros, because he at that point had the most 100-mile or longer wins. He had 67. And again, Carl Meltzer has the most 100-mile, but 100-mile longer was Giannis Koros. So once I passed him, and it was actually 3 days at the fair that I tied him, and then didn't I was that's a funny race, because I thought I passed Carl Meltzer's, or not Carl Meltzer,
Giannis Koros,
67. So I finished. So I was doing a double that weekend. I was doing the 24-hour, the first day of the 3 days, and then I was doing the Hertz Tesla in New York.
Yes, yeah.
I had
with Vinny Cap.
Yes, I had a day between the two. And Michael Ortiz, my buddy, lives in Brooklyn, or lived in Brooklyn at the time. I was going to go stay at his place, and we were both going to do the race together. So I finished the 24-hour race, had 112 miles at 3 days of the fair. And I told...
that's what I did. I ran that distance there once. So
good. Yeah,
112.
I see the 112 on your cap.
That's right. That's one of that. It's a number that keeps coming up for me. So
cool number. Well, I had done 112, and so that was the win. And so I was really excited, because I had had a couple 100-mile wins in a row, and that was the race that passed Giannis. So I told Rick, I said, I'm really excited. Not only do I have the world record for most 100-mile finishes, but now I have the world record for most 100-mile or longer wins. And he said, well, not so fast. He said, the race that you're just about to start, the next 24-hour race, we're going to, put the two races together, and then, whoever comes out on top. And sure enough, someone did 120. So much for my win there. But the next weekend I got the win. So I got that. But so I'm always looking for, what's the next thing. So now I want to have 100 or more 100-mile or longer wins. So I just did numbers.
And you've been out to you've been also working on getting every state done as well, correct?
I'm working on that, but it's a secondary goal. Yeah. If I happen to have the opportunity to do a new state, I'll take it. But that's, I figured that one, I can plenty of years to work on that,
Yeah.
So now I'm trying to, races that I could, get again the most in a year, and ones that I can potentially win. That becomes a bigger priority than the actual state.
Gotcha. So in the Northeast, what states have you not run in? Do you know offhand?
Oh,
In
I
the
don't.
Northeast?
And I know I've done New York, New Jersey, now Massachusetts, uh,
Connecticut, you did, I
yeah,
know.
yeah, Connecticut, yes.
New Hampshire?
No,
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 okay. Or Vermont?
no. And
Okay.
yeah, so there's still, still quite a
Yeah.
few in the East that I still need to do. Yeah, so,
And
but
Maine, up by the Gators?
no, so I was scheduled to do one, I think it's called Riverlands.
Mm,
Uh,
yes.
Yep.
in Maine, and happened to be one of those ones I was going to sort of double up. And I did the Sedona Canyons 125 in Arizona, which was midweek. And my goal was finish that one. And then, that was in Arizona, then fly from there out and, do Riverlands. And by the time I'd finished the race, it was just, there just wasn't enough time. And
Mm.
plus, that the Riverlands race is a bit of a challenging race, and I knew I was going to be going into it, pretty beat up, and so the odds of me getting that done in that time frame. So yeah, I missed out on that opportunity. So
Okay. Huh. So I guess I think before we wrap up here, I wanted to ask you if there's anything or any I know this sounds like such a corny like podcast story, podcast question, but like what is there any advice or general things that like maybe you don't hear a lot of people saying that you think should that ultra runners should be aware of, or like as advice or something for maybe a new runner that they're not going to read about on on
yeah,
Facebook or whatever?
well, I would say always be curious, be willing to learn new things. So my 23rd 100-mile race I was doing, I at that point had not had any DNFs. I'd had two drop downs. So one race I dropped from the 100-mile to 100K. Another race I dropped from the 100-mile to the 50-mile. But I got to finish on Ultra Savage showed me as a finish.
Mm-hmm.
Now I call those DNFs because I did not finish the distance I set out to do. So those are two of my 28 100-mile DNFs. But if you look on Ultra Savage, it only shows like 11 100-mile DNFs. But again, I count other things for me personally. But so I'm there at this race. I meet this old geezer out on the trail, and just this old guy. He was 62, and I'm 62, so about 62. But at the time, I'm in my late 40s, and he just seemed like an older guy. So I'm chatting up with this guy, and find out that he had done Western States, and it was one of my goals, and so I had just read an article about the Ultra Slam, and there's somebody who had done 7. They had the record for 7 of the slams. So I'm telling this old geezer about this guy, and the old geezer is just silent. He's not saying anything. And then finally he says, "Hey Ed," he said, "I'm Dan Brendan. That article's about me." And so I totally embarrassed. And I later on I figured out why he was so silent, because he was trying to figure out a way to not humiliate me, to let me know, hey, yeah, that's me. And the more time went by, finally just had to just, hey, that's me. Okay. Just so anyway, so now I find out that this guy, so I started talking to him more, and it's like he's done over 100-mile races. I didn't think that was even physically possible. Of course, I've done 265. But at the time I only done 23, and I thought that's just, crazy. So I said, well, you must know everything there is to know about 100 miles. You must have experienced everything. This would be a piece of cake. You have this down to a science. And he said, no. He said, I'm trying different nutrition plans at the aid stations, and I'm still, fooling around with different shoes. And at the time I thought, man, that's kind of that's discouraging that you could go through that many and not have it figured out. Well, I know now exactly what he meant. I've now ran more 100-mile or longer races than anybody in the world. And you know what? There's always an opportunity to learn. And as soon as I think I might know just about everything, that's exactly when the ultra gods say, oh, you think? Oh. Yeah,
All right on.
Stick this in your pipe and smoke it. So it's
Yes.
stay humble and run your own race. That's the one thing I've learned probably more than anything else. You just have to run your own race. There's so
Mm.
many races that I've actually done quite well and podiumed or even won. And it's rare that I'm in the lead, at the beginning of those races. I just happen to hang in there, run my own race, and it works out. So run your own race, always be open to learn and share time with others, and work on, if you can help somebody else, it's amazing how that works. And it's gotten me through so many races where I just felt like, I'm just shot. But I knew, because I've experienced so many times, I got to find somebody. I got to find someone who's struggling, and they're about to drop out, and I got to talk to them. And then, sure enough, find out, oh yeah, I'm dropping the aid station. No, hey, let's, or even don't even, just say, okay, well, can I hang with you? Let's do it together, and we'll get to chatting to the point where we get to the next aid station. It's like, hey, you want to go to the next aid station? Uh, okay, yeah, let's see how it goes. And then you'll get the next aid station. Now, what sometimes happens is that person will get back on top and they're like, man, they feel like $1,000,000. And then
Yes.
it hits me. Then I'm the guy that needs help. Then they're like pulling teeth. They're like, oh man, I'm shot. Like, all right, hey, come on, you help me. Let me help you. Come on, let's get to the next. So it's reciprocal in that respect. But
Mm.
and the other thing too is, we sometimes take ourselves way too seriously. I mean, look at me. I'm the Jester, and it's kind of odd how this is now. And I'm not a political kind of a guy. I try and stay away from that, especially running ultras. I just don't want to talk politics because unless you're right, in line with somebody, it might not be a good conversation. But anyway, it amuses me that now the big thing is they're talking about how each other are weird. It's like, I embrace weirdness. It's like, be your weird self. I mean, I'm thinking both political parties should say, yeah, we're weird. And we want all weird people to come join us because, we're a bunch of, sure,
Let's
we're weird.
keep it weird. This is a weird place, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And, I think we were talking, it was talked about in our last episode which had Vin Cap on it. And I guess Fred and Jimmy were talking about being weird and keeping our sport weird. And, that's kind of the space that we occupy. So nothing at all wrong with that.
Embrace your weirdness. I mean, this is me. This is so I am in every race. So
very good. Hey, Fred, do you have any closing arguments?
I don't. I didn't think we've covered it. I think we've covered it.
Very
Very
good.
impressive list of things you've done, Ed. You've done.
Thank you.
You get out there
Yeah.
and do a lot. You really do a lot.
Yeah, Ed, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I think there's, the big takeaway for me is helping yourself by helping others, or not necessarily in that order. And then just, setting goals for yourself, and a lot of times that will keep you out there and moving and making sure that you're not underselling or settling for something, because I think so often, all day long, we're given messages by these people who might not be authorities, who are going to say, oh yeah, your knees are bad. That's probably why you can't run. Actually, my father told me that when I was 3 months into running. He goes, you ever think maybe God's trying to tell you something here? Like, maybe you're just not cut out for this shit.
yeah.
I thought you were going to say when you were 3 months old, or no.
Well,
I
pretty
thought so
much.
too.
Right.
Wow.
Pretty much, No, early on in my
first
running.
memory, my dad reached into the crib and said, "You're not a runner, son."
That's right. Just, don't even think about it. Just lie there. Okay. Here's the clicker, yeah. So Ed, thank you very much. It was a pleasure sharing some miles with you at Notch View. This is now like our 6th episode on Notch View. But and I'm sure that a lot of our listeners are going to get a kick out of it as well. So as far as our listeners are concerned, you'll notice that we didn't talk about sponsors tonight. So we are 112% listener supported at Cultra. So if anybody would like to help support the podcast, you can talk to your friends about us, maybe share an episode that you found meaningful with other people. If you wanted to leave a review somewhere, like on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, I guess you can leave a review on Spotify, but somewhere, spray paint it on the wall, that's okay, right, Fred?
Yeah, depends on the wall, or
that's right. I meant Facebook wall, right?
Right, right. Not on like the wall of the Supreme Court building or something.
No, maybe not.
Not a Supreme Court building.
Yeah, maybe just some inferior court,
appellate court,
a lower court.
Yeah, and you can protest things like, what do we want? Nothing. When do we want it? Never.
That kind of thing. Right?
That's right. Pointless protest. So I guess until then, let's see.
There is one thing I wanted to say.
Yeah.
We talked about some dicey subjects, and if you're feeling hopeless, reach out to someone. People will reach out and help you. There's a lot of help out there. Don't despair. I know Ed had his down times, and look how great he's doing now. There, you can come out of these things. Don't just give up. That's it wasn't a prescription. It was actually exactly the opposite. It was showing how you can come back from this. So that's my message.
I know you're trying to wrap up. You made me think of something. So I ran a race a few weeks ago in Washington called Yeti 100, and it's a rails trails, and there's a segment of it that you go through a tunnel. It's 2.5 miles long, so and it's completely dark, so I was going through that tunnel and going out. There's quite a few runners, but then coming back, we were spread out. And I turned my light off, and it was just completely, dark. And it's like, it just made me think of how sometimes, it's so metaphorical to me that we get into this depressed state and we just cannot see the light. Now, actually, I should take that back. There was a teeny little, bit of light way, 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 way up in the distance, because it was completely straight tunnel. So you could see that metaphorical darkness at the end of or the light at the end of the tunnel. But again, 2.5 miles long. And it just reminded me how, when we get into that state of mind, everything just seems bad. It's never going to get better. Can't get any better. Things can get better, and reach out and get help. I mean, if it's to the point to where you're so bad that you're, having suicidal ideations, the number that I'm so glad they changed it now. It's 988. It used to be a toll-free number, but now it's 988 for suicide awareness and prevention, and the hotline. And but reach out to mental health. Reach out to a friend. I've had the opportunity to talk to so many people who have lost friends and family due to suicide, and it's just, in my family, we've lost people as well. And I just think about, I have now 4 grandkids. I would have never met my grandkids if I, and just so many things that have happened. I never would have gotten into ultra running. Never would have had the experiences that I've had. So, things, can and will get better, but it's hard to see that. And the same thing in ultras. We get to a point in ultras where it's like, I'm pulling out.
It's too long. It's going to be like, I'm never, this isn't what I signed up for. No. I did the math. So many miles.
I'm not going to make it. Right. I've done the math. Pace, I can't make it.
Yeah. Yep. At this pace, I'm not going to make it. But somehow, if you just freaking keep going, the miracle happens. The sun comes up, and and it doesn't always get worse. So,
and sharing miles with somebody, just like reaching out. If you're going through a tough time, don't go it alone. Reach out. If a person of faith, great, that gives them an opportunity. But a person not of faith, there's people around you that would love to to help you. And I hear so many times that when people do end up taking their lives, that people around them, if I had just known, I didn't know, and it's because they purposely didn't want people to know. They didn't reach out. So yeah. Anyway, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and keep pushing and keep going. Things do get better. Even in ultras, eventually they get better, and eventually there's an end point at some point.
Excellent. That's a great point to make, that there are resources out there. So thank you guys both for bringing that up. To all of our listeners out there, if you've made it this far, as we say, of course, seek professional help. And we will see you all in a mile.
Mile and a half.
All right.